cavalry officers who had been mustered into a company under the command of generals dispersed also in a few days. So wretched were they and so tortured by hunger. Those who had a horse to feed were forced, if they did not want to lose it, to keep some distance away, as there were no supplies at all along the road. The guard also lost more stragglers after Common, but this body of men, who of course grumbled a little, though always under their breath, and who got whatever supplies were going, still made an excellent impression by virtue of their general appearance, their vigor, and their martial air. These veterans cheered up as soon as they caught a glimpse of the emperor, and the battalion, each day on guard duty, kept up an astonishing standard of smartness. Thinking of the wonderful smartness of the guard puts me in mind of the contrast between our men from Moscow and the troops from the Dvina, Victor and Udno. At the time when we joined forces with them, our men, emaciated, bloodless, grimy as chimney sweeps, enfeebled, were like specters, although vigorous enough on the march and full of dash under fire. The others, less exhausted, better fed, less smoked by bivouac fires, seemed to us like men belonging to another race. They were alive, we were shadows. The contrast in the horses was even more striking. The artillery of those two corps was superb. The generals and officers were well mounted, had all their equipment, and had been enjoying all the good things that can be got on campaign. At Vasilovo, the officers of the Emperor's General Staff, Durok and myself, for instance, made more than one visit to the Duke of Regio's kitchen. So great had been the privations to which all ranks in the army had been subjected. In the engagement against the Moldavian army, our worn-out fellows from Moscow were not behind their comrades as far as courage was concerned. In fact, as was said every day, our soldiers had more courage than strength. When we reached Kamen, Plasnitzy, the emperor spoke again with me about his journey to France. He did not anticipate any further obstacles to prevent the army from reaching Vilna, where he considered that it would be as good as safe and sure of a chance to recuperate. He hoped to come upon his dispatches from Paris within 48 hours and to get news of the troops which ought to be coming from Vilna to meet us. We were almost in communication with the Bavarians. The arrival of the Polish Cossacks, whom he took to be only a few marches away, was his chief concern. He continued to count on the Prince of Schwarzenberg's advance, which he hoped would divert the enemy's attention from our retreat and give us a chance to take up a position in cantonments. He expected frequent attacks from Cossacks, but regarded them as unimportant, since our latest stragglers had organized themselves into powerful squads under leaders to repel them and to awe the peasants. It was common enough to see one of these small detachments of 15 or 20 men chasing 150 or 2 Cossacks in front of them. The emperor then considered himself to be out of reach of Wittgenstein and Kutuzov, and the admiral could only follow along in our tracks, that is, unless he made a detour, which would lose him 2 marches. On December 1st, headquarters were at Staiki. We had not hitherto had such a bad lodging. Staiki was nicknamed Miserovo. The emperor and the chief of staff each had a little niche 7 or 8 feet square. All the rest of the staff were crowded together in another room. It froze so hard that everyone sought shelter in this cubbyhole. We had to lie on our sides so as to save space. We were packed so tight together that a pin could not have been dropped between us. Going out into the darkness, someone trod on the foot of Monsieur de Bosset, who had been following us in a carriage ever since Moscow, suffering horribly from gout. The wretched cripple, suddenly awakened by the sharp pain that this clumsiness caused him, began to shout, "It's terrible! It's murder!" Those who were awake shouted with laughter, which awoke the sleepers and everyone, serious and light-hearted alike. The unfortunate sick man himself paid tribute to this momentary nonsense with roars of laughter. I described the scene to show how man is capable of accustoming himself to the most wretched circumstances, and how, just as the most trivial thing will distract him, so he can witness the greatest misfortunes almost unmoved. After crossing the Berezina, our faces were less careworn. For the first time, Poland seemed delightful to everyone. Vilna had become a promised land, a safe port that would shelter us from all storms, and the end of all of our troubles. The past seemed a dream, and the prospect of a better lot already made us seem to forget almost the disasters that had come upon us. Weariness, the privations of the moment, the sight of poor devils dying every instant of cold and exhaustion, all this counted for little with the naturally gay and careless French soldier. Danger makes men egotists. Those who had survived were accustomed to seeing pain and destruction all around them. The strongest characters refused to succumb to misfortune and tried by their calm to strengthen others who were weaker. We suffered terribly, of course. We had before us a constant spectacle of fearful misery, of overwhelming distress, but the instinct of self-preservation, the feeling of national pride, and the desire to uphold national honor prevented us from taking full account of this excess of adversity. Our spirits were exalted, and we did not know, or rather did not wish to believe, all that subsequently transpired. Yesterday's dangers then, like today's and tomorrow's, meant no more to our imagination than risks in a battle constantly renewed. Since we were all in it together, we were generally gay, careless, and even full of raillery, as one is the day before or after, or the very day of a battle. C'est la guerre. Unquestionably, despite our sufferings, our headquarters were in as good a humor as were the Russian headquarters. We were approaching Vilna. We were in Poland, and still no dispatches arrived. The emperor could not understand this delay, as we were very near the Bavarian Corps, then stationed at Velika. This corps, under the command of General Vrede, should have left the Glubakoye district and advanced on to Bunovice after the Second Corps' retreat, but it had turned after the 19th and was defending Vilna. This lack of letters from France, and especially the thought of the probable effect there, as well as in Europe, of the absence of all news about the army, was of greater concern to the emperor than anything else. He prepared a bulletin, the famous Bulletin 29, giving an account of the course events had taken and of our latest disasters. He said to me, "I shall tell everything. It is better that these particulars should be known through me than through private letters. Full details now will mitigate the effect of the disasters which have to be announced later to the nation." Headquarters were established on the 2nd at Selice, almost as uncomfortable as the day before, but we found a store of potatoes. It is impossible to describe the joy that everyone felt at being able to eat his fill. The cold was so intense that bivouacking was no longer supportable. Bad luck for those who fell asleep by a campfire. Furthermore, disorganization was perceptibly gaining ground in the guard. One constantly found men who, overcome by the cold, had been forced to drop out and had fallen to the ground too weak or too numb to stand. Ought one to help them along, which practically meant carrying them? They begged one to let them alone. There were bivouacs all along the road. Ought one to take them to a campfire? Once these poor wretches fell asleep, they were dead. If they resisted the cravings for sleep, another passerby would help them along a little farther, thus prolonging their agony for a short while, but not saving them. For in this condition, the drowsiness engendered by cold is irresistibly strong. Sleep comes inevitably, and to sleep is to die. I tried in vain to save a number of these unfortunates. The only words they uttered to me were to beg me, for the love of God, to go away and let them sleep. To hear them, one would have thought this sleep was their salvation. Unhappily, it was a poor wretch's last wish. But at least he ceased to suffer without pain or agony. Gratitude, and even a smile, was imprinted on his discolored lips. What I have related about the effects of extreme cold, and of this kind of death by freezing, is based on what I saw happen to thousands of individuals. The road is covered with their corpses. The emperor stopped for a little while at the crossing of Vilia, in the midst of a bodyguard, and on an eminence overlooking a fairly wide reach of road. I stood apart to watch the debris of our army file past. It was from here that I saw what stragglers had reported for several days past, and what we had refused to believe. Cossacks, tired of killing our stragglers or taking prisoners whom they were obliged to march to the rear, thus depriving themselves for a time of the chance of daily booty, were robbing everyone they came across. They were taking their clothes, if they had decent ones, and sending them away practically naked. I have seen cases in which they gave in exchange inferior clothing which they had taken from someone else, or from some poor wretch dead by the roadside. Every one of these Cossacks had a pile of old clothes, some of them under the saddles like pads, others over them like cushions. They never had ridden such high horses before. I spoke with some of the unfortunate stragglers whom I had seen robbed quite near the bridge, and with others who had been stripped farther away. They confirmed the particulars I have given, and added that the Cossacks, when no superior officers were about, drove them along in front of them like a herd of cattle.